One of the most annoying things about the United States of America in current year, and it's been like this for a few years, is that people are just expected to take lower and lower standards, a lower and lower quality of amenities, all based on the idea that we need to be oh so empathetic to those who are less fortunate than us. Now, I actually believe in empathy, in sympathy, for those who are genuinely in a worse off place. However, when this policy gets out of hand, when this starts to infect government, and instead of working on making places function, they decide to pander and essentially allow all manner of poor behavior, you get situations like what's going on in Chicago's O'Hare Airport. Now, you guys know that since the terror attacks on September 11th, airports are ultra secure for passengers. You can't go in there without taking off your shoes, getting x-rayed by a machine. All manner of nonsense goes on in these places. However, of course, like we see time and time again, the basic rules of sanitation, security, and all that do not apply to the homeless people, because what's going on in Chicago is essentially they're using O'Hare International Airport, one of the largest airports in this country, as a shelter for homeless people, and needless to say, people who are addicted to drugs, suffering from mental illnesses, are destroying the place. Now, before we get into this, I just want to thank everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join, no sponsor for this video, but without further ado, let's roll into the local news segment.
Well, good afternoon. The mayor says that steps are being taken to address the problem out here. One janitor that I spoke to here this morning says the problem is now out of control.
Anyone who's been to O'Hare in recent months surely has come across homeless people sleeping on benches or walking the airport hallways.
We've seen this beautiful gateway to Chicago been overrun by the homeless.
Alderman Ray Lopez, a frequent critic of the mayor's, appeared on a national program this week telling the host 200 to 300 people are using the airport as a shelter and what he called an indoor outhouse.
Now, the reason this story was brought to our attention, as you could see from the local news segment, is due to the fact that a Democratic representative decided to appear on Tucker Carlson in order to talk about this issue that has been ignored in the city of Chicago. And the images that they showed throughout the course of this segment of people sleeping on benches, people absolutely destroying the bathrooms, are just another sign of the fact that in a lot of left-wing Democratic places that have embraced all manner of ridiculous extra rights for homeless people, the consequences are being felt and they're getting more and more ridiculous. Things are getting more and more absurd.
They're not just urinating in the hallways, they're taking baths in the toilets. They're making a mockery of what Chicago is.
A janitor shared these photos of piles of clothes in a bathroom here. He also shared photos we can't put on TV that show urine and feces in elevators and hallways. He also told me off camera he has been threatened by a homeless person who had a knife.
So as you can see, they're basically occupying the various bathrooms through the airport, which again are for the paying customers at the airport. They're not for homeless people to live in, to drop off all their clothes in. And of course, they're using hallways and elevators in order to urinate and defecate. And of course, as we've seen time and time again, these people are bringing weapons into the airport and threatening and menacing people who dare cross their paths. And it's only a matter of time, if this is allowed to continue, before somebody gets killed by one of these homeless people who is having a mental health episode, addicted to drugs, or any problem that they might be having during their time at this place. Again, it doesn't need to be this way. You can't bring a knife if you're a regular, upstanding, hardworking American to an airport without getting some crap from security, but these people are allowed to carry weapons, do whatever they want, and there's almost no consequences. And this is a consequence of the fact that Chicago, like many other Democratic cities, don't enforce quality of life crimes. They don't really arrest you, they give you a ticket for a lot of the things that were described in this situation, if you even get that much.
We understand that homelessness is a problem we must address, but making O'Hare Airport a homeless shelter for hundreds of people on a daily basis, when we're trying to welcome people here, when we're trying to encourage tourism, bring back the business clientele, bring back families to our city, and to only have them greeted by hundreds of homeless who have mental health issues, may be armed, maybe not even be clothed, That's not something that institutes a lot of confidence in our mayor, in our city, and clearly she doesn't care.
Look, that alderman is 100% correct. They're trying to rejuvenate the city of Chicago. They're trying to bring back the businesses. They want people to come in as tourists. And as bad as some of these major destinations have gotten, like San Francisco, the car break-in capital of the country, also littered with needles and human defecation and all those other issues, the fact of the matter is, I don't think when you fly into the San Francisco International Airport, you're confronted at that very moment with hundreds upon hundreds of mentally ill homeless people. And again, this is just something that Lori Lightfoot thought she could get away with, because until Tucker Carlson shined a spotlight on it, nobody was really covering this issue. In fact, Lori Lightfoot actually looked dead into a camera and told people that they shouldn't take these claims seriously, despite the videos, despite the images, despite the testimonials, despite the fact that people have since independently verified it by going to the airport, despite the fact that it comes from a Democratic alderman, because these images were seen on Tucker Carlson's show.
Last night, Tucker Carlson, Fox News, and the Daily Mail featured the homelessness, the encampments that are growing at O'Hare Airport, and all the baggage claims, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Mm-hmm. Anywhere from 200 to 300 people a night are sleeping there, even when the weather is not inclement. Pictures like this, people don't know if they're stepping over bodies or people sleeping on the floors. What are you doing about it?
Well, let's start with consider the source, which is Tucker. No, I think that's fair.
Do you want to see the pictures?
I've seen it, but let's consider the source, which is starting with Tucker Carlson and Fox News. They're never going to portray our city in a favorable light.
You know, a lot of sophisticated, elite, high and mighty Democrats will go on TV each and every day and talk about how you dumb, idiot rural Americans live in a post-truth world because you believe the evil orange man and you don't believe the high-end elite politicians like Lori Lightfoot and like the mainstream media. But again, these people are just as guilty, and I would actually argue more so, of putting us in a post-truth world when they could just say, because the opposition said it, it is automatically untrue, something that we learned is actually quite effective throughout the course of the Trump administration. Democrats and the left wing essentially decided that whatever position the orange man would take, they would take the opposite, and the mainstream media aligned with them, and this became the public truth, and you were actually censored for disagreeing with it. So Lori Lightfoot's tactic of saying that these images were on Tucker Carlson, so despite the fact that millions of people can see them, despite the fact that people have been talking about this issue on the internet well before Tucker Carlson, despite the fact that the alderman was complaining about it, therefore we should treat them with some level of suspicion and pretend like it's no big deal. Just, it doesn't really exist because Tucker Carlson showed it, therefore it's just not real. If Tucker Carlson showed you an image of the Pacific Ocean, guess what? There is no Pacific Ocean because Lori Lightfoot and the Democratic Party have not declared that to be true.
Let's consider the source, which is starting with Tucker Carlson and Fox News. They're never going to portray our city in a favorable light. My understanding is those pictures are quite old, but the fact of the matter is we have taken and will continue to take the steps that are necessary to move people out of the airport.
So first of all, I have to take note of the fact that Lori Lightfoot says Tucker Carlson as Tucker Carlson. This is an abominable performance on her part, but then she goes on to deflect to these images being quite old. They're not very new, therefore no big deal, therefore it's not happening, because some of the images of the disaster that was Chicago O'Hare Airport, don't worry about it, those aren't actually all that bad, and we're doing everything that we can possibly do. And then she goes on to list a bunch of places where the Chicago police, where her office, is not going to do anything about the homeless problem, and I think it's important to play that.
The airports are a very different place than on the street, under an underpass. It's a secure location, and the message is clear from me to the Department of Aviation, the police department up there. We absolutely fundamentally cannot have people sleeping in our airports who are homeless. That is unacceptable. And so we're going to continue within the bounds of the law to do what is necessary to provide those folks with support, but elsewhere. They can't be in our airport.
So what I find quite interesting is that Lori Lightfoot said the airport, totally different from being on the street. totally different from being under an underpass because it's a secure location, meaning that the city of Chicago does not enforce laws, quality of life crimes, etc. against homeless people that are in those locations, and the only real reason why she's drawing the delineation between the airport and those locations is that you might not stumble upon those issues visiting Chicago unless you go to those certain areas. But of course, they should be enforcing the laws against those people in those locations. They should not say, oh, go live under a bridge or anything like that. They should say you can't sleep out in public. First of all, it's dangerous. Chicago is incredibly cold. Secondly, they have shelters, and a lot of these homeless people refuse to go to these shelters, and that is just not an option. You can't be a public nuisance when there's shelters available. That doesn't make any sense. It defeats the whole purpose of the shelters. You don't have a right to sleep on a street corner. You don't have a right to block somebody's business, to block somebody's home. Just because they move you out of the airport so that everybody doesn't see you when they come into your city and remark on it doesn't mean they've solved the problem. It's just an indicator of how bad Chicago actually is, that the airport was taken over by these people.
Now, this morning we did see Chicago police officers ask a couple of people to move along, but about an hour later they were just back in the same seats that they were in. And this is a really tough issue for a lot of people out here, especially those that work here at O'Hare. That janitor that I spoke to off camera said he doesn't want to throw people out into the cold, but also says that there are a number of problems that need to be addressed out here at O'Hare. We're live at O'Hare. I'm Eric Rung, WGN News.
And for those of you who say, you know what, the issue is housing, there's a big housing issue in these cities, it's so unaffordable, that is true to a certain extent, but understand this housing first policy and all of that is not allowing people to build up housing to meet the demand in the market. It is allowing people like Lori Lightfoot to give away boondoggle contracts to connected developers to never actually deliver on enough housing in order to solve the problem. One of the big issues that you see in cities like Chicago is the fact that they set up this whole government apparatus in order to deal with the homeless, and once you have people hired in positions to deal with the homeless, the last thing that they want to do is actually deal with the homeless, because then they lose their jobs. So creating this whole complex of people to deal with homeless people is not actually a solution. And by the way, when you actually let people build up housing and improve areas, left-wingers like Lori Lightfoot call that gentrification because, oh my god, they're building these nice, affordable places that's displacing our historic, crime-ridden areas. How can we possibly have that happen? We have to fight against it. So they bog down development with all this red tape, and then that leads to the housing crisis, which again makes people want the government to give out those cushy government contracts where they well overpay for housing units of low quality, and nothing is solved with the homeless population. This is not the way to go. Look, the city of Houston is not perfect by any stretch, but the city of Houston is one of the fastest growing cities in the United States of America. It will actually eventually pass, in my estimation, the city of Chicago in terms of population. Yet, over the decades, housing prices in the city of Houston have risen significantly less than other places. And in a lot of ways, adjusted for inflation, housing costs have actually fallen in the city of Houston. And this is due largely to the fact that they don't have zoning regulations. They don't have all this red tape. They let you build across the city. Chicago is notorious for red tape. Thus, housing is artificially high. So yeah, if you think affordable housing is the issue and not mental illness, not drug addiction, then the first thing you want to do is get the government's grubby hands, get people like Lori Lightfoot out of designing each and every community in the city of Chicago and let housing actually come to a natural level without the heavy hand of government involved in it. Unfortunately, that's not what's going on, so you have problems where people can't afford housing, and they're basically allowing all these drug addicts and vagrants to do whatever they want unchallenged by law enforcement, and unsurprisingly, when you incentivize and reward certain types of behaviors with programs and incentives, you're going to get more of that. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, you show me a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about Lori Lightfoot's failures. Till next time.